Okay, let's talk about heists. Truth is, I don't hate the genre, but this book pushes me to hate it. So today let's talk about Just Watch Me by Jeff Lindsay. This book right here. Let's start with a summary, is what I would normally say. But in all honesty, this book lacks a plot altogether. Just imagine every heist cliche ever, then imagine those cliches done poorly. Then, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. The book stars master thief Riley Wolf. More on him later. A thief who has never, ever failed? Maybe? I don't know. The book says it at the beginning, but then contradicts it later, so your guess is as good as mine there. After another successful heist, Riley Wolf is wanting more excitement. Oh, yeah. It's mentioned basically only at the beginning of the book and never ever again that excitement's the main reason he does these heists and not money. Again, never mentioned again, never brought up. He discovers that very valuable precious jewels from Iran are being displayed in Manhattan, and that security is going to be cutting edge. Which of course means it will have the most general, basic features that every security system has. Motion sensors, an alarm if you remove the object, and running on a backup power source. Really kind of basic cliche stuff, no more advanced than you'd see literally anywhere else. But the book's going to treat it like it's the most mind-blowing thing in the universe. Okay, so we're going to start getting into Riley Wolf now, but before we do, we need to learn a bit about him. He is the worst protagonist I have ever had the displeasure of being unable to root for. He is unable to redeem himself and does not have a sympathetic backstory whatsoever. And most importantly, and horribly, is he does, in my opinion, one of the worst things a human being can do. Note, I said one of the worst things, not the worst thing. But he either gets really close to doing that, or does it a lot, depending on what you personally think the worst thing is. Moving on. What I'm actually talking about is sexual manipulation, where you use sex to somehow coerce someone into doing what you want. And our glorious, noble hero, Riley Wolf, does it twice in this book to two different people. He does it once in an awful way, and once again in a god-awful way. So first is the art forger Monique. Basically, Riley Wolf has a bet going on with her where if she fails to do, or is unwilling to do what he asks, she has to sleep with him. Now, if you're slow on the uptake, allow me to explain why that's really bad. A bet like that with someone you're not in an intimate relationship with means that you're basically forcing them to do what you want, no questions asked, or if they are ever truly unable to, you're sleeping with them against their will. Thankfully, that never comes to pass in this book. The fact that it's a possibility that is mentioned many times in the book is one of the many reasons to hate Riley Wolf. And yeah, he somehow does it worse than that. Now, on to the worst one. The museum of which the jewels are being held at is owned by a very wealthy family. In order to access that museum, our hero, Riley Wolf, does what I call Riley Wolf's 6-step foolproof plan. So allow me to list them out for you. Step 1. Meet a woman in the family. In this case, her name is Katrina, and she is literally the only person in this book who isn't inherently an asshole, which makes the rest of this plan even worse. Convince the woman to cheat on her husband with you. You just see where this is going? If you don't, let me spell it out for you. He's having a woman sleep with him under false pretenses with no interest in continuing the relationship afterwards. Yeah, look, I'm not here to talk about marital things and being in an exclusive relationship. that is an issue way above my pay grade. What I can say with certainty is being in a non-exclusive relationship and cheating on someone under false pretenses is inherently awful. No questions asked. And we're only at step 2. Can you believe it gets worse? I can, because it does. Murder her husband. It does turn out her husband's a pedophile, but Riley Wolf makes it very clear he'd have killed him anyways. Marry the woman. Oh boy. Yeah. Again, under false pretenses, and yeah, they sleep together and have sex every single night. Murder her brother, who is in charge of the museum, so that she can give you the job. And, well, not the nicest person in the universe, and her brother was lazy, he was mostly harmless, meaning that Riley Wolf killed an innocent man with no real remorse at all. Heck, not even a mention again after this is done. This, now, step 6 is optional, but come on, you gotta do it. Write the woman a letter saying how she has horrible taste in men, how you never loved her, how you'll never see her again, how you tricked her, haha, you got her, and most likely horribly traumatizing and scarring her for life. Yeah, I can't stand Riley Wolf. After Riley Wolf successfully steals the jewels with no real tension, that was like a minor thing, but no more tension than the heist they had at the opening of the book. And I remind you, the entire point of this book was that Riley Wolf didn't feel like he was having enough of a challenge. Well, after that, he takes Monique, the art forger, to his private island that was never mentioned or hinted at before this point in the book. And apparently no one ever comes to it. Now, I'm going to ignore the fact that that's really unrealistic and stupid. And I know I'm supposed to keep recapping the plot, but seriously? A private island out of nowhere, for no real good reason. And yeah, no one noticed it. I know I didn't say I wouldn't mention that, but yeah, it bears mentioning. Somehow no one noticed. Back to the summary. Where she considers sleeping with Riley Wolf. Now, to her and the book's credit, I'll give them half points for this, she doesn't because she realizes that Riley Wolf was being an asshole. However, the only consequences of that is she doesn't sleep with Riley. Their arrangement remains unchanged. She doesn't seem to outright hate Riley, which she should, which does make me dislike her as well. Now, that is how the book ends, but also only a little over half of it. We've got to talk about perspectives. Whether it's in first-person narration or third-person narration, books tend to use both pretty much, although you don't get much second-person narration. You know what? We need more second-person narration. But anyways, this book uses a very strange mix of first-person and third-person. When in first person, Riley Wolf is our narrator, and you'd think any scene with Riley Wolf would be in first person, but no, it's kinda really inconsistent and annoying. More importantly than that, though, in the book's attempt to chase every heist cliche ever, you have to have that detective who chases the heister. You gotta have an arch nemesis for our master criminal to evade and outwit. These can also be used to enrich the heister's backstory by teaching stuff the viewers/readers didn't know. As you can imagine, this book fails on both counts. Special Agent Frank Delgado is our pursuer, and boy howdy is he pointless. When the book is in first person, Riley Wolf is quite happy to share what little, and I do mean little, backstory he has. Meaning that, for example, what Frank Delgado finds out, what it takes Frank Delgado like 3-4 chapters to find out, we already know as of chapter 1. And it goes on like this. Nothing Frank Delgado finds out is ever found out before we already know about it from Riley Wolf. Meaning, no special information is gained from Frank Delgado. Well, the ending will more than make up for it. Frank Delgado and Riley Wolf will have an epic confrontation. Will Riley Wolf outsmart and outevade Frank? Oh. They never actually encounter each other once in the book, and Frank Delgado has no impact on the story whatsoever, making his entire storyline in this book completely pointless. Well, I gotta close the review now. Before I do, here's a few miscellaneous things. The dialogue. Some of it's okay, but honestly, most of it's like the room level stuff. This book treats sex like the be-all end-all of all romantic relationships. Which, for the record, it isn't. Literally, the only real draw Riley uses to seduce Katrina is sex. Period. Also, the security team in this book, the security team guarding the jewels, is filled with tough military guys who the book treats like they're thugs. Well, Riley disguises as a federal agent at one point in the book, and despite being suspicious of them, none of them ever think to double-check his claim, despite that being, in theory, really easy to do. Yeah. As mentioned, not the greatest book. That's Just Watch Me, a god-awful book that doesn't really understand the cliches it uses. If you liked this video, please leave a like. If you want to see more like it, do subscribe. It really does help us out. But, more importantly than any of that, have a good night.